Well, I was getting all caught up in that, and I almost didn't remember to be ready to say hello because I guess I have a show to do. Hi, everybody. It's great to have all of you here. I didn't get to say hello to all of you in the chat, but I'm so glad we've got a number of people watching. Thank you to all of the members who are watching on Patreon as well. I think the Patreon people, I don't think they've integrated it yet where you can see the chat that the people on YouTube are seeing, but go ahead and chat no matter whether you're seeing this on YouTube or Patreon, because we are broadcasting to both destinations. And I'll try to pop comments up into the picture once in a while here. For example, we'll just pick one at random and give it a try. Is it this way? Yes, there we go. Hello. Hello, everyone. And I assume everyone can hear me fine. I tour of what's behind you. Well, actually, you'll have to wait for that tour for Monday. We are going to do live update. I will know the results of my PET scan by then. I'm a little sore tonight because I just had okay, thank you. Zeno just dinged in and said it sounds fine. I am going to have the results of the PET scan by Monday. I'm a little sore because I just had the port removed, which is great news because it means they're not going to give me any more infusions. And then we're going to see how things went. But it looks pretty good and pretty hopeful. But I'll do an update with more information, and then we will have a live show and sell most of the items you see behind me on Monday. That will be my Christmas show because then shortly after that in December, I am hoping to be able to hit the road. And I haven't been to Kentucky or Florida to work on my mall spaces for quite a while, and they are needing some help, and I need to just kind of get back in the swing of things. So I've got a route in mind, and we will get there eventually. So um, Tulsa time, yes, I'm sorry you can't see the YouTube chats if you're on Patreon. I don't know why that is. I can see all of yours though, so we do know that you're there, and thank you for being there. I don't know why, but at this point, this program can't integrate the two. It can integrate it to me, but it can't integrate it for all of you to see each other. But please do, by all means, make comments, and I'll try to pop them on the screen so that everybody can see them if it's something that's a question or amplification of something we're talking about here. And speaking of what we're talking about, well, we have two topics tonight, and both were suggested by members. A bunch of you asked for the second topic, and one particular person asked for the first topic, and that is, well, let's just start with the question that I got was, could we talk about as is merchandise, whether it's okay to buy, when it's okay to buy? So let me throw it out there for all of you. We will, sorry, just a moment. I've got to turn a button off so we don't get dinging. So yeah, basically, what is your opinion? Do you buy things for your collection that are in less than pristine condition? And if so, how do you judge that? Do you have things that have been in the family that are threadbare but are so near and dear to you, you'll never let them go? Do you have, what is your favorite piece that's as is, and why do you keep it? And then if you're a reseller, are you buying as is, and when is it okay to buy as is, and what will you buy that's a little bit subprime? And are you fixing these things? Are you putting them out to sell as is? I'm just curious to see. So let's see. Fossil Forward says, I don't mind as if the price is right, especially as placeholders in my personal collection. Corinne, if it's hard to find or rare, unless if it's cheap, it's mine. I personally buy broken stuff if I like it. I have my broken Murano animals. Selling, not so much. Oh, thank you for the thumbs up reminder. That's helpful. For my own collection, I'm much more tolerant. I used to buy some as-is items, but fewer now because the resale was not good, and that is often the case. Um, I have a few of my dad's and my grandmother's miniature lamps that I keep that are not in perfect condition. If it's really old, that's a good point. I love the cheap chip stuff for myself too. Well, and sometimes it's just about that's what the budget allows and that's what's there. If it's one of a kind or hard to find antique, it's okay to buy as is. But if it's everywhere, no thank you. And I have to say that is my feeling about it too. I collect as is because they're a lower price point that I can afford. And that is one reason people do that. Also, as a postcard seller, they were sent in the mail. They're all as is. And that is true of some categories of stuff. We'll talk about that a little bit too. As a relative, I keep all heirlooms. And that's probably my case, I would say. I absolutely have imperfect things that fit with my imperfect self and I don't resell. So why not? And I think that's a great way of looking at it. Um, okay, we'll see you later, and we'll probably be here when you're done with dinner. I know that she has a schedule that she keeps, so we'll be here when you come back. Um, I look at it this way. Well, first of all, why do people buy as is and worn things? Everything you said is absolutely true. For some people, it's what you can afford. I know when I was young and started out, I was not as concerned about condition because I needed a set of dishes. If a few of them were a little worn out, that was not, pardon me. If a few of them were worn out, that was not going to affect my decision making. Um, Filling space in a collection. I'm a coin collector. If I come across something and it's really, really worn, practically flat, but I don't already have it, I'm going to keep it and then hopefully upgrade later. Um, I know some people who buy as is things because they feel sorry for them. Misty at Thrifter Junker Vintage Hunter talks about the island of misfit toys, and she has a whole shelf of stuff that's a little ragged, a little threadbare, and she likes the fact that some kid played with it and then maybe the teddy bear's missing an eye or that sort of thing. And I get that. I don't personally do that, but I do understand where the emotion of it and not wanting to waste and that sort of thing. um, well, hello, Sally Rob. It's nice to have you here. Joan says, I try to buy things first for resale that do not have dings and dents, but I'm more understanding if it's for my own collection. I usually think about how I would not be perfect if I were that old. That's a good point. This wildlife says, I do not forgive with the more rare or hard to find pieces. Now, that's an interesting point, and that does get to my philosophy is buy the best you can afford. So, rather than buying 10 of something that are so, buy one really good one. And if it is something rare and hard to find, that makes sense. And part of that is because Miss Wildlife is a big art glass collector. And we're going to talk a little bit about categories and what the categories that people buy that are as is as opposed to the other. Grampy's braided rug is a little threadbare. I have a blanket. I meant to bring it in and show you. It's my Indian blanket. My grandmother would put it on top of me. It's just a little thing, and it had prints of teepees and chieftains and all of that sort of thing on it. And it is so thin at this point, you can practically see through it. And it's sitting in on my bed because I just can't bear to part with it because it's this connection to grandma and when I would take a nap at her house. Um, I sometimes buy chipped Holt Howard, and yeah, a lot of that is chipped because it was very lightweight ceramic. I've rescued some ephemera and spent more to repair than they were worth. And that's another question. Do you repair or do you and restore? But we'll talk about that in a minute. Um, what do you suppose happens to the items that gets passed up? And that is a legitimate question because I'll tell you in the case of, I'm sorry, just one moment. In the case of the Goodwill in St. Petersburg, Florida, for example, chipped, cracked, or just plain clear glass without a pattern, they put it right into the glass crusher, and you can hear it crushing the stuff when you're shopping in the store. It's rather unnerving, and it's kind of sad in a way. Um, for me, sometimes a little wear is okay because it's like my wrinkles. They tell, yeah, well, you look way younger than your age, but I get it. And yes, I have a few lines and I'm proud of them. I earned them all. I have a K-Finch Angel with chips I was happy to get for cheap, and that makes sense because you know what? That's a hard piece to find. So I get that too. I buy jewelry I know I can fix, and we're going to get into the fixing thing. Um, I damaged a piece I want to restore. Yeah, I did too. I get it. I need to find a good pottery restorer. I have my grandmother's purse with a broken clip. I treasure it because I never knew her. She died before I was born. Yeah, exactly. It's the connection to the person is what you have there. I like to make broken items lovable again for another generation. Well, hello, bargain barons. Nice to see you. We're talking about as is. Do you buy as is? Do you sell as is? Do you keep it for your collection? And what's acceptable and what isn't? And if you have any opinions about that, you're welcome to chime in. Um, the Hello, Robert. Nice to see you. Cardboard advertising, especially 30s and 40s, is tough to find in fantastic condition. Yes, it is. I have a 20s Howdy Doody orange Nebraska bottle of some company sign in fair condition, but I'll never find another. And that is the thing. Sometimes things are so rare that what you get is what you get, and you just are glad to get it. On the other hand, yes, Ruth Ann is working in a Goodwill and try really hard not to destroy stuff. And if we can't sell it, we sell it by the pound in the aftermarket. Um, what genres of items are more acceptable with damage? Well, let's talk about that for a minute because I have some opinions and I'd be glad to have any of you chime in. Um, to me, there's huge differences in value in some categories, and I'm going to do some overlays here. Here's a good example. I collect coins. This is a Carson City dollar from 1883 in the original case that the U.S. Mint, when they found these in the 70s and sold them off, it's in their case, it's sealed, it's never been touched by human hands. It's in uncirculated condition, and now they're even within that, they're starting to grade those even more minutely. That's worth about $250. Here's the same one in very good condition, and it has that blotch on it because somebody cleaned it. We're going to talk about cleaning and restoration just a little. Should never, ever, ever clean a coin, by the way. There are some things that should never be restored, and coins are one of them. This is worth about $25, so 1/10 of the price. So condition does make a huge difference. On the other hand, if I didn't have this state in my collection and I found this one in this condition, I'd keep it until I found a better one. Um, if I find a Curious George cardboard with a rip ear, I would pay. Yeah, I get it because they're hard to get. I stock up on postcards I get in collections that are too damaged to sell individually and sell as crafters lots. And that makes sense. It's the same. A lot of people do that with broken jewelry. There is another way to use some of these things. The store in St. Pete that grinds salt to glass sells it as clear cullet to glass blowers. Um, let's see here. Yes, exactly. I think I'm underestimating. It's probably worth more like 45 in that condition. Um, what else do we have here? Let's see. Okay, marbles, which we're going to talk about at length here shortly. So this is Orphan Annie, and this is a worn one from the 19th, about 1930. And this one in this condition is worth somewhere around $30. Here's the same one in perfect condition, and it just sold for $150. So condition really is important to certain types of collectors. And for me, yeah, I'd want the one in really great condition because not being able to really see the image, and that's what the piece is about. So to me, that's an example of where you want to hold out. The parish calendar on the left, this lot of two is being sold for, I think it's currently got a bid of $26. The parish on the left is enchantment. Now, if the print part didn't have damage, you could frame that and it would have some value, and you just put it in a picture frame and forget about the calendar, but the tear goes into the image area, so it's not going to be worth very much money in that condition. The same piece in a nice frame with UV glass and protected in perfect condition just sold for $595. So there is a giant issue in the collector's minds, and that's why I'm glad to hear those of you who are reselling saying that you are not uh, you are not buying as is to resell, because it pays as a reseller to wait for something that has a better chance. Stamps are an example. This one is canceled. That's why it has the smudge and a postmark on it. Now, collectors in the old days used to put hinges on the back of stamps, including new ones, to hold them into their books. Nowadays, we have clear mounts that we use, and the piece goes in the clear mount, and you don't stick something to the back. This piece in a hinged condition, uncanceled, is worth about $3.50. But this one, which was never hinged, is worth about $5. So even the things collectors did to things, one of the things that I just hate is those spring tension things that hold plates on the wall. I have seen old plates where the spring tension actually wore grooves into the side of the plate. There are plate holders that you can put on the wall that don't use pressure and clamp on the thing to hang plates, if that's your thing. And it is worth the investment. Um, Lisa has a good question going back to this one. How expensive is that framing job? I would estimate, because it's not a terribly large piece, let me get the right one up here. It's not a terribly large piece. I'm thinking that the frame on that with the UV glass is probably in the $50 range, which for a $600 piece to preserve it is probably worth doing. There is something to say, though, about framing. A lot of people frame art, and it's great to preserve it, and it's great that it's to your taste. And then I have someone who brings me a print that's worth $150 and says, "Well, I paid $200 for the framing, so I want $350." Well, the next person buying it expects it to be in a frame, and they don't care what you paid for it. Unless the frame is perfect for their house, they might just chuck it and put another one on. So framing is something you do for you, or because you are presenting things in a certain way and you need a look. It's not something to spend a lot of money on if you're doing it just as a general reseller, because the person who gets the piece is going to do it to their taste. Um, let's see here. Yeah, most framing you've had done is $100, and it is going up. It's getting very expensive now. Advertising pieces. So this is stag, and advertising, like many other categories, is judged on condition based on a grading scale. Coins have a grading scale. Advertising is based on a 10-point scale from 1 to 10. This one is probably about a 2 or 3 because it's got scrapes, it's got dents, it's got rust, the top is a little bent, it's got damage on the face of the stag. It's recently sold for $55 because it's relatively hard to find, and someone wanted it as a placeholder, or they wanted to put it in a display where they didn't care as much about how it looked. A really serious advertising person just bought this one at the same time on eBay, and this one in this condition, which is probably about a number 7, because it has some wear on the top that you can see and a little bit of a scuff here or there, but the basic piece is intact. This sold for $595. And if it was in perfect number 10 condition, it might sell for 1,000. So in certain categories, it really matters a lot to the collector. And so that is the thing to consider as a collector or a reseller. Some things are not saleable in if they're imperfect in some categories, or they are dangerous. And chips on the rims of glasses, this is something to be aware of. A lot of older stemware, when prices were high, if something got a little chip on it, they might take it to a glass repair, and the glass repairer might buff down the edge a little bit to take that chip out. That means that piece is going to be slightly shorter than all the other ones in a set. So if you're looking at a set together, look for that, because you might have one or two that are repaired in a set, and you want to make sure you're not paying top dollar for every piece if some of them have been restored. It's not that they can't be used. Another thing to look at is look down from the top, and if the rim seems a little thicker than the other ones, check it out and see if it was buffed down a little bit into a thicker portion of the glass. That happened a lot on things like pottery and porcelain as well. So for that, you need to use a black light, and where the repair is, if there was a crack or something, you're going to see a different refraction of light. So this is a Stangle piece. It has a chip on the edge. I had a recent dinnerware video that a lot of you might have seen, and I talked about why lead in glazes is not a big deal unless you have chips or cracks or heavy wear on the surface where it can let the lead out. And this has a chip in it. And probably where that is, it was from being hung on the wall with one of those pressure things. And so you want to hang it on the wall? Sure, I wouldn't use the piece. And here's another one, and I can't believe this sold for anything. Someone actually paid 99 cents plus shipping on eBay for this rose, false graph tea rose. It is absolutely cracked, stained down the middle. I would not use this piece. I would not sell this piece. I would honestly send it to Miss Udalali and have her make jewelry out of it, which is a good thing to do with these sorts of things. That is the way that I feel about this sort of thing. You just have to, and here is the thing. What about items that maybe broken or damaged that are a piece of a set like lids or trays? Boy, it's really up to you. Again, if it's a lid for something like a sugar bowl and the bottom has a crack, I would be concerned about lead poisoning, depending what you're keeping in it, or leakage. On the other hand, if it's in the lid and it doesn't really matter and you turn it to the back and you don't care, well, that's fine. And we will talk a little bit about sets. I used to always, honestly, it used to be if there was a cream and sugar and one was good and one was bad, I would throw the bad one away and only keep the good one. Now I'm realizing that for some people, again, for economy's sake, or just because they really want both pieces now and then they'll replace the other one when they find a perfect one, I'm actually tending to leave those together now. Um, let's see here. Yes, exactly. And this is the thing. There's lots of other ways. It's like Fossil Forward said about putting the postcards in a group and let someone make collage art out of it, turning these into jewelry, turning glass into new glass. There's lots of things, there's lots of ways to reuse these things, but it doesn't necessarily mean I need to keep this forever, even though I probably shouldn't. Um, let's see. Use it for a plant coaster. Well, and I suspect that's what they were doing. Probably something like that. And maybe this was the pattern they grew up with and they figured it's cheap and I'd like to have one piece and that's how I'll use it. And sure. Let's see what else we have for some examples here. Some things are meant to be damaged or as is, or they're one of a kind, or very, very scarce. And then it doesn't matter so much. I know Ruth said earlier, if it's 200 years old, well, we'll show you a piece like that here. Um, yes, there you go. I labeled a piece as a shelf sitter recently that was an exquisite teapot that had a hairline, and that's a great idea. Older dinnerware before about 1900 or 1910 wasn't necessarily vitreous. Probably want to be real thoughtful about whether you're going to use that or not anyway. So some of those things, that's what they're for. This was made of spools and it's something that's handmade. And yes, there's an age crack in the bottom shelf and it's a little wonky and all of that. And that's part of its charm. So it doesn't have to be perfect because it was made by hand and it's a one of a kind thing. And I think that makes a, I think maybe that makes a difference. Um, yes, movie props, exactly. It depends how you're using it, of course, and that is a good point. Oops, I lost my place. Sorry, just a moment. Where were we here? Okay, here we go. There's the spool shelf. All right, I'm back. This is the kind of old paint I approve of. This is actually a barn find. This is 100 years old. It's handmade. The paint was applied by hand, and it's a little chewed here and there because it was used. And I like this. I like this a lot better than somebody just whitewashing a fairly new piece of furniture and scraping it in a few places. So this doesn't have to be perfect. And a lot of its charm and appeal to the collectors or the decorators using this is that it's imperfect. Let's see. Here's a good example of something that's really old. This has a big hairline crack. It has a bunch of chips around it. It's from the Kangxi dynasty in China. It's from approximately 1650. So we're talking something that's 350 or 375 years old. It's not likely that you're going to find another one just like it. It's not likely you're going to find another one that's perfect. Now, if you have something with a hairline, the important thing is don't put it in places where it's going to have, don't put it in a window where the sun's going to make it hot or it's going to get cold in cold weather. Temperature extremes make hairline cracks grow. So if you're going to keep something with a hairline, make sure you keep it in a pretty climate controlled space where it stays at an even temperature. Um, let's see here. When you pass by an item like the chipped rose bill from the estate sale video today, do you still get it for yourself? What do I not mind being as is for my personal collection? Well, I collect coins and I don't have the budget to spend on uncirculated coins for everything, so that doesn't bother me necessarily. If it's a very unusual piece of treasure craft I haven't seen before, which is unusual, but if I find some, then I'll keep that. So there's a few things, but mostly I'm pretty picky because a lot of what I collect is glass. I want glass to be perfect. I don't want chips. I don't want abrasions. I want it to look clean. A lot of the furniture I like is bamboo and rattan from the 40s and 50s, but I want the upholstery to be good because I'm actually using it. I don't want it to be threadbare. So I'm more on the side of I don't buy as is for myself mainly, but there are a few exceptions. Um, how do you clean snow babies? I would say first I would try a toothbrush with very light moisture, a soft toothbrush, go in circles and be very deliberate about it and pat it dry with a cotton cloth and do as little scrubbing as possible so you don't take that finish off. Um, Oh, yes. Well, it's in the mail, and I promise it should be there in a few days. No glass with chips for sure. Yep. Um, definitely. Now, here's an example. Some people collect things because they're damaged. Staple repair is a great example of that. This is a Copeland spoke compote that is from the 19th century and it sold recently for almost $500. Those four dots in the middle are actually where the bottom was stapled back to the top back in Victorian days when they didn't have glues and things like we do now. And there's the underside, and there is the staple repair. There are some people who specifically collect staple repaired things. So here's an example where as is actually cool. And it's the reason the person wanted it. Now, the same piece would be worth more money if it didn't have that damage and that repair, but the repair is a specific customer who wants that because they think that's an interesting technology. Let's see. Yeah, and again, how are you using it? What is the piece? A big blow mold Santa, those are hard to find. They do sometimes have cracks and chips. If it's where you can't see it, it's great. You're going to put it in your yard or your window. You're not going to notice it. It's not going to bother you. Um, and you got a good deal on it because it wasn't perfect. Here's another example. So this is a star pattern compote from the early American press glass era, probably about 1880 or 90. And it has turned lavender because it was in a window and got sun for years and years. And the old glass had manganese in it. And it turns lavender in the sun. It is something that some people specifically really like. They like the story behind it, they like the color, they want to put it in a window and not have to worry about it, and so this appeals to them. Now, later glass doesn't have that chemical and it turns a very unpleasant yellowish color, and most people don't collect that. But this is technically damage. And there are a lot of glass collectors who want nothing to do with the piece that is sun turned. So it's a different customer. This, on the other hand, I have a real problem with. It sold for about $75 because, yeah, it's a fun color. This was irradiated. This was not natural. This was put into a radiation device and turned this color deliberately. I personally have a real problem with that. I don't really believe in that kind of thing, and that's going to get us into uh, restoration a little bit here. Um, so, do you restore something or do you not? Yes, exactly. This is what people call it is sick glass. The glass collectors, and this is true of the lavender as well, because it has a sickness, there's something wrong with it, and it can't be undone. So it is what it is. Um, and that is just, yeah. And see, Carol Sue loves the lavender, and lots of people do. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't approve of doing it artificially. I just don't think that's a good thing for us to do with original items. Um, oh, you've run into some dyed crystals. Yes, another thing they dye is alabaster, those fruit. I did an outdoor show and I had all this colored marble fruit and there was dew point, and next morning I had big stains in the basket that it was in because the color had actually run off and stained the basket because they were not actually colored alabaster at all. So that was interesting. The glass doorknob turned purple in your old house, exactly, and that's really cool because it's a natural thing and it shows the age of the house, and I think that's really a fun thing. Um, I am with you. I'm not into tampering with history. There's enough of that already. So restoration, if you're going to buy something restored, make sure it's well restored. This is a Buddy L fire engine. This is a good restoration. They made sure the decals are right, the paint is right. It's a little glossy, but they didn't overdo it. They did not over restore it where you can tell from 50 feet that it's been redone. On the other hand, this one, what in the world is this? Oh, it didn't have the original spotlight, so we put a brand new Chinese plastic spotlight on the back. Oh, and we slapped some chrome on it because we thought that looked cool. Well, this is completely unoriginal. It's not what was intended. It's fine if you like it, but it's not really the way that this thing should be restored. And so a serious buyer of these, this did sell online for about 135. If it had been restored properly, it would have sold for about $300 more. So it does really make a difference. And I agree with you, Lisa. I think just be honest, keep things as they are, give full disclosure, and let the collector make up their mind how they want to deal with it when they get it. So um, yeah, the old spotlights were really cool. And so I guess my conclusion about this, if you're gonna restore something, decide if it matters, try to have it done properly. I love going to Rhinestone Rosie's with my jewelry. I showed her in a video recently, and I like using her because she has the original stones. She will put the right color in the right thing. One of the pieces I took to her had red stones, and four of them had fallen out, and somebody just glued white stones in. So there's randomly four white stones in a pin that's supposed to be red. She took them out and put red in. They're perfect. It looks great. And suddenly, instead of the $5 pin plus, I think it was, I don't know, $16 in stones, now I have a $45 pin. So that's a good restoration. My rule of thumb generally, and you can decide how you feel about this, is if I see a piece of furniture, an old car, an old toy, if the paint, the finish, if everything about it is more than 50% good, I'm not going to mess with it. I might clean it up. I might put Howard's product on a piece of furniture and try to take a water ring out, but I'm not going to strip it and refinish it. I'm not going to paint it. If it's more damaged than that, if it's more rusty than that, if it's really going down to, number two or three condition, well, then if I feel like I can do it, I might do something to it. But I'm more on the side of what Elderly Poodle said about don't change history. The condition of the piece is part of its story. So um, when I replace the when I replace the stones, do I disclose when I sell? Okay, now that is a really interesting question. Um, if I have Rhinestone Rosie do the replacements, I don't disclose because she uses the correct glue and the correct stones, and it is exactly as it was new. And so I don't disclose it in that place because a jewelry expert, which she is, would look at it and say, it's all correct, it's proper, it was done right. If I do it myself, which I do occasionally if it's a fairly easy thing, I will usually say, oh, yeah, I put a new stone in there because if they don't like the way I did it, I want them to know which one so that they can take it and have it done the way that they think it should be done because I'm an amateur and I know that. But, there's a lot of simple things that I can do and a lot that I can't. So, um, I actually bought a Zuni ring with missing stones. I was wearing it at work and another stone fell out. Yeah, that happens. Sometimes when one's gone, it means that they're all kind of loose in the setting somehow. Or if it's pave jewelry where they're glued in, then it may mean that it's been out in heat and that the glue is loose and you may lose other stones. Or it could be that it's Chinese. I went to a store where they had a bunch of Chinese rhinestone jewelry. It was all brand new in a case, and the case had a light in it. And at the bottom of the case was a pile of rhinestones that had fallen out of the jewelry. And I just thought, I don't know why people buy this stuff. Okay, so basically, my conclusion with this, and I hope this was interesting for you, is like what you like, do what pleases you. If it's for you, it's yours. You can do what you want with it. But if you're doing it for other people or for resale, honest representation, and also how much work do you really want to do? And wouldn't you rather buy something nice that somebody will want and give you more money for? So that's my take on it. Um, so with that, the other topic, which is longer, and so if there's any questions about that, go ahead. I tried to answer some as we went along, but if there's any other questions, let me know because then we're going to go on to our other feature tonight, and I'm excited about it. I got some help with it, which I'll talk about in the middle. Um, well, I'll talk about right now. I got some help from Corinne, who is here with us in the chat, um, because she is a marble collector. Um, and we'll talk about marbles because a bunch of you have asked to. And thank you very much. I appreciate it. I am feeling better. I do think I know I look better because I edited Secret About Tonight's video. I filmed that about 2 months ago, and when I look at me now and I look at me in that video, I realize, yeah, I've come a long way, and I also realized how really sick I really was. I think there was a certain amount of mind over matter in my head that I can look at the visual evidence and go, oof, boy. So, so yes, marbles. Let's talk about marbles. I had some as a kid. I think we all remember playing with them as a kid, and I thought that this was really fun. And I think those of you who are ephemera collectors will like this too, if I can figure out where we're starting here. Bear with me. When I do the overlays, there's little tiny captions for them, and they're small enough that I can't always see them without stopping and taking a minute. Uh, okay, we're a little further down. Here we go. Ah, yes, here we are. Okay, so marbles. I love this picture. This is from about 1960, and I love that it's girls playing marbles because I remember girls and boys played with marbles, usually on different sides of the playground, but it was something that was universal and a lot of people liked. And now we've all grown up, and a whole lot of us really, really, really like art glass. And because a lot of us really like art glass, a lot of people are getting into marbles, and the prices on old marbles are really accelerating, especially in the past few years. Corinne told me that she's been collecting about 3 years, and she said, I'm amazed how much the prices have gone up in that short period of time. And it is absolutely true. Um, Oh, that's funny. I remember that too. Yes, we tried to crack marbles by heating and freezing, and I had one that it worked on, but it was not delivered. It was because I left it all out all winter, and it was in a puddle, and I didn't know I had dropped it there. And when I came back, yes, it was cracked. We use marbles for martial arts. We pick them up with our toes for toe strength. That's fascinating, actually. That's really cool. I didn't know. There are lots of uses for marbles, actually. I mean, everything from flower arrangements to board games to apparently martial arts, which is really cool. Is it still possible to find good old marbles with a minimal amount of knowledge about them? Yes, it absolutely is. And we'll talk about how towards the end of this. Um, and You would try marbles at the beach. That seems hard. I always thought you needed a hard surface. So, so a lot of people are really into marbles, and marbles go back all the way to the Egyptians. They've actually found sets of marbles in the tombs of child pharaohs, and they've found marbles in almost every civilization, every ancient civilization. And originally, of course, they were made of stone, like this one you see here. And they tried various kinds of stones. Carnelian, which is similar to agate, it's a form of chalcedony, turned out to be a pretty popular thing to use. So there's a carnelian version. And then agates. And that actually is why by the time we start making glass marbles, you hear the term aggies. Well, aggies originally were made of agate. And eventually they figured out how to get this same effect with glass. But back in the mid 1800s, they started polishing agates in Germany and turning them into marbles. Sometime around, well, right about the time that Germany stopped being a feudal country and started to form as a modern state, which is about 1850. And so it, uh, it is, I think it's just, there's lots of different stone, lots of different designs in the stone, and they're very pretty. Then, of course, earthenware. The one on the left is glass, the one on the right is earthenware. Earthenware, of course, is clay, for example, like this one that is a bag full, and you see the agates are in the bag below, and on the top are Benningtons. And Benningtons are made of clay. Bennington was the first big pottery center in the United States in Vermont, and they would make marbles for kids back there, and other companies followed suit with a similar type of thing. This one actually belongs to Miss Wildlife. This is from her collection, and you can see that, like ceramics did, especially because Bennington was an early form, sometimes they'd pop and you'd have a bubble in the glaze, like you see on this one. And that was definitely a very popular kind, but they didn't hold up very well. And the plain brown ones, they might sell for $3 or $5, but when you get into some of the colors, well, like this pink and blue, this sold for $35 recently. So it does make sense to pay some attention to the ceramic marbles. And the French made a lot of colorful ones out of clay, but again, they tend to be soft. They tend to chip easily, and that is the thing. Yeah, this is I invented a game where we would play soccer on a board in the wintertime when we couldn't go outside using marbles because I didn't know what to do with mine either. um, and yes, I do think the colors are really fun. Let's see here. So the French are making these, but they're pretty soft. So we start seeing them made of stoneware. This is a stoneware marble. Again, notice that it has the interesting ribboning, and the glass companies eventually mimic this in marble. So a lot of the designs that we see in glass later actually are derived from stone and clay and other materials that came before. And a lot of these, and then they got into porcelain. And porcelain, they call these chinas. Porcelain, as I said in the dinnerware video, is actually a lot harder. It's fired at a higher temperature. It's harder and more durable than earthenware and stoneware. And so it was better for marbles. So more of these, some of these were made at the time. They were also fun to decorate. So there's a lot of painted surfaces, but of course they were used by kids mainly. So a lot of them have kind of worn off. This is actually considered to be, we were talking about condition recently. Well, This is considered to be in fairly good condition for a painted marble on porcelain, even though you see it has a little bit of a stress crack and it's got some paint loss. This sold for $390 recently. The old Chinas are actually selling for good money now. Um, so if you see old China marbles, that's one thing to maybe not say, oh, it looks worn out. It might not be worth much because they're actually worth quite a bit. This one is the King's Rose. This sold for 350 recently. Another porcelain one we have here. This one sold for 120 with the bullseyes, which was a popular pattern because it looked like carpet balls, which was a game that kids played indoors in the winter time in Victorian period. So let's see here. Um, Dinosaur marbles. That sounds fun. Yeah, we'll get into some of the more contemporary ones. At least we'll touch on that. But there's a lot to know about the old ones. And here's another one. Now, this one looks like a regular marble you'd see. This is actually made of gutta percha, which is basically the first form of plastic that came out in the mid-Victorian era. And so this one is actually a plastic thing. So they tried a lot of different materials, but ultimately it was glass that was the easiest to make with the most fun colors and held up the best. However, if you were a poor kid, you might have had steelies. I had one or two of these in a collection I got when I was a kid that was an old collection. And steelies, you see the X pattern there. It's important to know that these were hollow inside. So it should have the X pattern because they basically folded over pieces of metal like a bell would be, except crimped all the way to where there's no opening. And that is different from a ball bearing. Ball bearings are heavy and solid and don't have that pattern. So don't confuse a ball bearing for a steel marble. They're not the same thing. Um, how can you tell if a marble is old or worth money? Well, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of different marble makers and some of the things that people look for. And then I'm going to give you some resources because this is kind of a huge topic, actually. Corinne and I sat down and she said, I hope you have a few hours because we're going to just touch on everything. It's taken me 3 years to learn some of this stuff, and there is a lot of detail to it. But I promise you that we'll tell you some things that'll help you with that. Um, so here we are. Now we're into the mid 1800s, and the German companies primarily are the ones who were making glass marbles first. This is what they call a Grenier, which is one of the big companies there. And this is from about 1850. You can see it has a lot of wear because they were used, of course. And then yes, I always thought that ball bearings and steelies were the same thing too, and so that's why I wanted to show that because I grew up with my dad had lots of projects going. There were always ball bearings around we could play with, but they're not the same, and they were kind of hard on the glass marbles, and I know why now. Um, This is called a Joseph's code. Now, notice on the left side that we have a pontil here, and that's because these older pieces were made of I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's talk about a few other things and then we'll come back to this. Um, okay, so first of all, for a marble to be antique like anything else, it has to be over 100 years old. Now, in the marble collecting groups that I saw, there's a really good website called with the West Virginia Glass Collectors Club. Their their version of vintage is 25 years old, and they base that on the garment industry because 25 years old is vintage fashion. I usually think of 30 years as being vintage. Etsy says 20. Basically, at this point, vintage is going to be anything in the 20th century because they are still making marbles today. And antique is going to be anything before about 1920. And that means it's going to be handmade, not hand blown. They don't actually blow glass to make marbles. They use canes or rods and they in the old days they would gather the glass, and so that was like the glass making technique where you take a gather of glass and you might insert a rod with color. We'll show you some examples here in a minute. um, the reason that that's important to know, going back to the um, most people are looking for glass marbles, and so the reason it's important to know Where have my overlays gone? Oh, if I was on the right page. There we go. Um, we had that problem last month. I panicked for a minute. Let's see here. Okay, so this is a Joseph's coat, which is a particular style, and it's like a coat of many colors. Notice on the left there's a bumpy spot. Well, that's the pontil because they would gather the glass, form the piece, and then they'd have to snap it off the rod, and so there'd be a little bit of glass left there, and like there would be on a glass vase. It's really the same kind of process, and so they would have to polish that out. Now the Germans typically it looks a little rougher. They didn't fire polish; they would actually just sort of grind it down. So you're gonna when you look at an antique marble, a real antique marble, a 19th century or early 20th, you're gonna see some evidence of a pontil mark. And if it's a little bit rough like this, that's typically going to be German. And um, if you are, I love this comment. Yes, that's true. Hand blown is a very strange term that does not really make sense in any guise. Um, Now, in America, there was a company in Ohio called Leighton, and they did what they called the Navarre line. This is an example of this. Notice the pontil isn't as rough looking, and that's because they actually would fire polish theirs. And so it does have a pontil, it does have the bump, but it's not the same as the German one. So that's a way you can tell those apart. But you're always going to see a gathered pontil on these pieces. You can see on this one here, that's a good example. So you're looking for a place where the glass comes together and it's a little bit sort of a rough bump. It's not going to be perfectly round. And you're going to see something like that. Now, when we start seeing machine-made pontils in the transition period, they started having machines make them so they didn't all have to be hand formed, but then they still had to snap it off, and they would still have a little bit of it's a crease, so they call it a creased pontil. It's not technically really a pontil, but it doesn't really matter. You get the idea. So you may see a little line where they had to shear it off and then do something to it. And so you'll see that kind of a mark on those transitional era ones. We're going to show more of these, so there won't be a test, I promise. Um, Here's another gathered piece that you see the pontil mark on the top there in the center. The Germans also figured out, and everyone else pretty soon copied, that, well, we were making things of clay and now we're making things of glass. What if we put the clay in the glass? And that is called a sulfide. And this particular one is a rather rare sulfide. Now, there have been reproductions of these, so you want to make sure it seems like it has some wear, because again, these were played with. And if it if it looks like what they call wet mint, which is like it looks like it just came out of the annealing layer and it's perfect in every way, you either have found something in amazing condition that was never played with or at the bottom of the bag, or it may be a reproduction. So that's something to be aware of. Sulfides can be rather valuable depending on the scene. This one is a girl with a doll, and it may seem rather indefinite, but that's an unusual variety. And so this one recently sold for $220. And let's see, there we go. Um, got some really cool cobalt and white swirl models. They told us we're older. Well, we'll talk about that. They probably are, and we'll look at some of those too. Um, Now, this sulfide with the pig, this sold for a small fortune. They think this may have been made in California. There were apparently some small producers in the United States, and California was much smaller at the time that these were being made, so they wouldn't have made many. This sold for over $2,000. So unusual sulfides can be big money. But they're still making them in Italy today. So you really do have to look for condition and make sure you know you're buying an old one if you're going to pay big money. On the other hand, the sheep is $50, and that's kind of a more typical price for most of them. And yes, she did look like a Buddha. And yes, I have no doubt that there are similarities between buttons because a lot of buttons were made of glass. I've seen some big old button collections. If I ever find another one, we'll talk about those because they're pretty interesting actually. And yeah, the sulfide buttons can be very expensive. So sulfides are kind of a transition. Here is what got Corinne started. When you talk about the motivations, this was the first thing she showed me, and she said, I love uranium glass. I'm getting older. I don't necessarily want to schlep giant, heavy glass to shows. I like small things that are shippable. I wanted some uranium glass in my collection, and that's what got me started. Is ooh, wow, look, uranium glass in marbles, and yes, a lot do glow because of the glass they used. A lot of the glass that was done in the machine age in marbles was from neighboring glass factories, and we'll talk about that too. And so it could have had anything in it. So some of it is going to glow. And so if you like uranium glass, take your black light and shine it on a jar of marbles. The Okay, this is a popular style from Germany in the day. These are called Lutz banded, where they have the bands with the wide transparent gaps between them. This one is an opaque Lutz because you can't see through it. There's transparent and opaque and various versions in between. And then gosh, I didn't really talk about size. I think we can do that a little bit later. Um, this one is clam broth, but it's black with clam broth, which is really unusual. This recently sold for $440. And yes, the Lets are very cool. And they can vary in price. The first one that I showed you, this lot sold for 480, but individual ones are selling for 3 and 400 if they're the right color combination. You have a Let's Banded. Okay. There are books and websites to learn about this more, and I will go over those at the end, I promise you, because, like I said, there's so much to know that Corinne was very generous and gave me some good sites, and I found other ones on the computer as well, and I will share some with you. Let's see here. Okay. These are Latticino. Latticino supposedly means net in Italian. It actually means coffee with cream, but the English thought it meant net, so we call everything Latticino, and the Italians kind of smirk and giggle when we call it that. But these are German. They do have pontils you can't necessarily see. You also notice they have contusions. A lot of times there will be little bumps and bubbles, and you can tell where something got hit really hard because, again, these were played with by kids. And so there are condition levels, and condition is something that we'll talk about a little bit later as well. Let's see. Yes, okay. So these went for 175 each recently, and they have what they call a divided core, which means that they have a core where there's one design and then another design over it in the surface. Let's see. This is another Joseph coat end of day, and I'm showing you things that sold for a lot of money just so you get the idea. Obviously, lots of marbles sell for $2 and $3. In fact, I know one dealer who puts all his cheap ones in a gumball machine, and kids put a quarter in and get an old marble out of it and think it's cool, which it is. Um, this is an end of day meaning that they basically took what was left in the kiln and just swirled it together. And so you get odd color combinations that were not the part of the regular line. They just wanted to use the stuff up. And so you get interesting things like this paneled one. This sold for $210 recently. Um, this is another Joseph coat. Again, look at the bottom. It's a little out of round because that's where the pontil is. This one sold for 230. Red is a good color. This one is cased glass, so that means that you've got a clear coat over the pink and white, just like you would have cased glass in a vase, like Bohemian glass that they put a color over another color and cut back. Well, same concept. Um, the Lutz is a wider, that's a good question. From what I can tell, the Joseph's coat are really a lot of, let me get back down. Sorry, when I pop a question and then it takes me back to the top. So here we go. Okay, so Joseph's coat has a whole lot of lines together, and the LUTs, which I will find for you again. Here's a better example: wider bands and more separated. So, and yeah, this is why I wanted to do this when a bunch of you asked for marbles, and then I talked to Corinne, and she made me realize how really interesting they are and how foolish I've been to sell jars of them for $100 without going through them. Well, now I think I'm going to spend some time with them because this is, to me, um, a really interesting subject because I love glass. It's the same reason I got into jewelry is I love glass, and they make rhinestones out of glass, and so the next thing I know, I'm into jewelry. So one thing leads to another. It's a dangerous world. um, okay, this one is a peppermint cane. Now, caning is where they take. It's like millefiori glass. They melt a bunch of different colored glass rods together, and then they cut pieces off of it, and then in the case of a marble they put a clear around it, so they swirled the cane was white, blue, and a pinkish red all pushed together, and then that becomes the core of the marble. um, and Let's is the glittering strip. Thank you for that. I'm glad you're here. I want to make sure I'm telling people right, and so yes, very good. Peppermint swirl, that's a fun color combination. This sold for $190 recently. Here is a ribbon core swirl, and it's end of cane. And what does that mean? Well, look at the top. This means that the cane, the rods that they were using, they were at the end of the rod, so it doesn't actually go all the way to the top. They just sort of used the end that was left and just shoved it in there and called it good. And that makes it an interesting variety to a collector because it's a little different than the ones that go top to bottom like they usually do. Um, the lines are on the previous one. Let me get back to that. Um, the lines are, I believe, with the German ones, and Corinne can correct me if I'm wrong. There were some companies in the later years that only did the exterior, and then the interior is a core color. But I believe with this one that the lines are all the way through. It's basically a cane of glass that's polished off into a marble, so the lines go all the way through, the way I understand it. Um, let's see here. Okay, and then this is mica. Mica is very important in late Victorian and early 20th century times because well, they used it, they called it isinglass. It was actually what they used for the windows on pot-bellied stoves so you could see if the flame was going, for example, but it also was very sparkly. So it became a very popular decorating accent. It was also used on a lot of arts and crafts era lamps. And it was used in marbles to create flecks throughout the marble. And so, okay, very good. Yes, Corinne concurs. Yes, the older one, the lines go all the way through. Okay. Yes, my technical explanations. that is, that is, I'm sure about what they were thinking. It's the end of the day. I don't want to start with a new one. Just do it. No one's going to care. It's for kids. So there you go. Um, Okay, now this is another one. This is called onion skin. And again, you see mica flecks in it. Onion skin because of let me make sure I'm getting this right. I do have a note on this for myself. Um, oh, just managed to print on both sides. Okay. Yes, onion skin is where they basically they use the leftover flecks of glass and stretch it, and that gives it an onion skin. And you see that in a lot of 1920s. If you think of stretch glass, it has that sort of a look as well. Um, and we've got a couple more, and that one I just showed you sold for 450. On the other hand, these sold for about $25 each. So it has to do with condition, has to do with colors. The mica in this one makes this one unusual. Aventurine is another thing that is used in marbles, both the old school and the newer glass ones, newer meaning 20th century, would use this to give it a sparkle that's kind of an all over sparkle. More, it looks more like it's near the surface as opposed to the mica, which are flecks inside the piece. And mica you usually see in marbles that have some transparency. Okay, we talked about the gathered glass one before. I'm bringing it up again because this starts to be in a transitional era. Um, we go from gathered to transitional, and transitional means now we're using machines to make the glass, but we still have to break it off, and it still has a pontil. So you will see some sort of a pontil or a crease, like we talked about on these. Transitional era is pretty much like early 1900s to about the Depression, and prices on these can be big. These are in the $150 to $250 range. Then we get into an era where instead of gathering glass and mixing our own colors, now we're starting to use cullet that we get from other places. Acro Agate in West Virginia, for example, which was one of the biggest marble producers in their prime, they made a lot of their stuff out of cullet, all those little novelty planters, the children's wear, and this, a lot of it came not from glass they mixed, but from cullet they bought because they located near other glass companies and said, hey, we'll take your leftovers from the end of the day or whatever you've got, and we'll make them into marbles. And it was a way for those companies to make a little bit of extra money selling something that before they would just throw away. So all of a sudden, cullet is the thing. And yes, people do collect cullet. A lot of the information that we have on marbles comes from the fact that people got interested and started digging at the sites where the marble factories were. And a lot of them had dumps where old cullet got thrown. And so people were able to rescue it. And there are collectors for just the cullet. And you can see this is from Corinne's collection. There's the piece of cullet. There's the marble that they made using those colors. This is where we start getting into a whole lot of what people made here. And that was here's Acrocolor. The other one was by a company called Peltier, which we're going to talk about in a minute here. Um, oh, Karen, well, the first marbles go all the way back to ancient Egypt. Pretty much every civilization, children figured out how to gather stones that were round, polish things down, and even I was mentioning there's the tomb of a child pharaoh that had a set of marbles in it from 3000 BC. So they've been around for pretty much almost all of human civilization, actually. Kids like to have toys. And it was a pretty obvious thing, I guess. As soon as you invent the wheel, you say, hey, this thing rolls. That's cool. So we got Acroagate, but we're going to start with a company called Christensen. Um, this is Christensen, and they are one of the many, there's many companies that worked in the US, but Christensen basically invented the process that allowed machines to make marbles and took out a lot of the handwork. And so suddenly they were able to produce on a much larger scale and produce cheaply because of it. But they still wanted to maintain the look of the old marbles and the old agates and the things that people were used to. And so the way that they did that, um, they they basically they basically would take the cullet, it's broken into little sizes, they put it in a machine, the machine turns the marble, and they come out the other end. And at first they would have to polish them and there'd be a crease line, and then eventually they got fully automated machines where there's no crease line at all, so you don't see pontils or creases or anything unless it's a factory flaw. um, this one is transitional because it did have a little bit of a crease line. Uh, one of the things they made that was really, really popular were guineas. And the guinea was based on, let me make sure I'm getting this right, because the guinea is Yes, that's right. Okay. Yeah. The thing that's important about guineas is they used a wider range of glass flakes, and so you get all this different color. And the guineas is really they're really colorful. They're really fun, and I can't answer this question. I haven't found mine either. Um, but the guineas are just really fun. They're really popular. They're very colorful and really, really highly collectible now. This particular one sold recently. Let me find the amount. Yes. The pre-auction estimate was $700 at the top end. It sold for 1,400. And part of it is that some of the collectors are older people who have money and they're buying their childhood back, and this is it. So they're doing it. So really, the prices have gone up, and also a whole lot of people who are into art glass have gotten into these as well. And I hope you feel better, Sarah. Have a good rest. This is a Christensen agate swirl, and you notice the swirl pattern. This is after a while, and I'll give you another YouTuber, and some other information on where you can study the different swirls to tell the different companies apart. But this one's the way Christensen did it, and the that's interesting. Yes, that's right. Very good. Thank you, Corinne. She's going to pitch in with some information I'm sure that will be really helpful for you. So I'll try to keep putting that out there. Um, this one has good colors. This one sold for, I think, around $280. This is another Christensen swirl. This one is a striped transparent. You see the transparent part, and then you have stripes in it. So hence the name. When we get to the Peltier models, marbles, they have all sorts of cute names. This one's red slag. Slag is where it's just a mix of colors like slag glass. And this one being red is harder to find. This one sold for $110. Yes, there is a Facebook group. Yes, absolutely. And that is something to look for. Um, this one I think is fun. This is the turkey, and you can kind of see where it looks like a bird in the middle. And that is something that you see mainly in Christensen marbles. You also see something that I think I can show you here, and I have another example later if it's not clear here. But this Christensen piece, the transitional one, if you notice at the top, it looks like a number 9. That's something you see in some older German marbles and also in the Christensens. And so that's a way you can identify their swirl, because a lot of the swirls look a lot alike. So there are definitely tells and clues. And again, there is a YouTuber who really is knowledgeable and talks a lot about that, and will give you his information as well. Ah, interesting. It was sparkly and almost blinded you. It probably has aventurine or possibly mica in it, but I'm betting aventurine. Now, this is an example of a spiral versus a Popeye. A spiral, you actually see the swirl. A Popeye is more just blotches of color. So when you hear the term Popeye, these are terms marble collectors will use and describe things as, so that will help you. Um, and yes, I know, I have to admit, this has gotten me really excited about this too. Ah, good. Critter Girl's back. Nice to see you. We are just starting on machine made marbles and some of the companies that made them. And the next one that I'm going to talk about is coming up here when I can get my place back. There we go. Is okay, this is a mossy agate ribbon. You see the ribbons in it. And we're going to talk now a little bit about acro agate. Now, this is what they call a patch, and some people would call this a tongue patch because it's the shape of a tongue. But patches is where you have a patch of color in another color. And so, um, oh, Popeye is specifically a pattern of acro. Thank you. Yes, I didn't mention that. Um, so we have patches, we have Popeyes. This one's blue onyx. This sold for $420 recently. Unusual colors definitely get people's attention. This one's a sparkler. You can see, I think the sparkle in this one is probably aventurine, and this one sold for 350. This one is called egg yolk for obvious reasons, blue egg yolk. This one sold for 150. And oh, I'm glad you have a jar full to go along with. Yes, I think it is kind of fun too. I'm looking forward to getting my next jar and trying to apply this knowledge that I have been able to get. Acro corkscrew. This one sold for 75, and you can see the corkscrew pattern. That's a pretty obvious thing. Acro did a lot of corkscrews. This one's called Indian Blanket because of the colors. And I take no responsibility for the what now would be considered politically incorrect names. We're talking about things that were named in the 1930s, and again, history, I go with the names. I always raise eyebrows when I call something a ladies' rocker or ladies' watch or a gentleman's watch, but those were the terms. This is the Lifesaver corkscrew. This one is a Popeye, and it's got the green and brown and a little bit of aventurine because you see the sparkle. This one is a limeade. They had limeade, which I believe glows under a black light, orangeade, and lemonade oxblood. Now, as I've found recently with the collection of acro agate pieces that I've been selling, two pieces of acro agate can look the same and one will glow under a black light and one won't. And that's because, again, they didn't mix all their own colors. They got glass from other people and used their glass. So it really depends what's in the batch. So you really do need to test those things and not just assume if you're wanting to just make a collection of uranium glass marbles that two marbles that look the same are both going to act the same. Let's see here. Carnelian, again, carnelian, like we talked about at the beginning, carnelian and agates as actual stones were used for marbles because they were hard and would hold up to plain marbles. And when they made glass ones, they made glass ones that had the same look of actual carnelian or agate. This is a bunch of shooters. I'll talk just briefly about sizes. Um, it's really best if you say you're selling these or you're asking for a description, have the person actually measure it. But in a general sense, peewees are anything a half inch or less, or under a half inch. A half inch to 5/8 is standard. 3/4 of an inch to just short of an inch is a shooter, and anything over that they call a boulder or a toe breaker is another name for them for obvious reasons. Um, Reminds me of the planets on the episode "Come Beyond the Moon." That's funny. I haven't thought of that in years. You got it. Let's see. This is Master. Master, a lot of their production was later, and the colors are a little bit different. This one is called Sunburst. Master did get some stuff from Acro. One thing I like about Acro personally, though, is Acro invented its own type of machinery, and it was when the factory closed, it was destroyed. So they don't have the machinery to make things exactly the way Acro did, but a lot of other companies, they can replicate the process. Um, let's see. Peltier is probably of the machine era marbles, the ones that are going for the most money right now. And I can see why in some ways. The colors are really fun, the patterns are interesting. They had a whole bunch with what they called NLR, which is National Line Rainbow. And NLR, the colors are really bright and vibrant typically. This one is called Lipstick and Ketchup. um, which is an interesting name for it. Um, this one is Christmas tree, but this one is citrus Christmas tree because it also has orange. Christmas tree is usually the red and the green together. Because this also has the orange, this just sold for $525. The expected selling price at the auction was $200. So there is definitely an active market right now. And yes, we will talk about marble displays, and flower frogs are a great way. In fact, I would say I sell as many flower frogs for marble collectors as I do to people arranging flowers. This one is called the Dragon in the NLR line. Um, Great colors with the chartreuse. This one is the Liberty, red, white, and blue. This one sold for 120. This one is the Red Zebra Rainbow. This sold for 200. This one is the Bumblebee. I like this one a lot. That one sold for 100. This is the Peltier Burnt Spider-Man because it's got the black in it. There's Spider-Man, there's also Superman. It's just based on the colors. And I don't know whether the factories used those names originally or if kids named them and it caught on, but I'm sure the books that I'll talk to you about will tell you more about that. This is a red black wasp that sold for 170. This one is a peerless patch. It doesn't have a seam, so this is after the transitional era, and it's got the transparent in the middle, which I think is really great. It's not completely opaque, and so this is something that's a little more. It's just a little different. This one's the John Deere, as they call it, because of the colors. It's priced at 95. Now, if you can find original packaging, that can be worth a lot of money. This sold for $2,100 because it is mint in the original box, and there are not many of them that survive like this. Uh, the Betty Boop alone usually sells for a few $100s because there's not a whole lot of stuff that was made in the day about Betty Boop. Most of the collecting and the stuff that was made that is Betty Boop is from the 1980s and 90s. This one's a Peltier Ruby B, the Tiger. I guess that's an obvious color scheme. This is another Zebra. Zebras come in all sorts of different colors, but you see again, it has this effect of the alternating lines. Here we have, okay, this is a Zebra, and again, this is aventurine. I always want to say adventurine, which is wrong. It's aventurine, and it has the sparkle in the dark color there. This is another company called Ravenswood. It's the only example that I have to show you, but they were in business around the same time. A lot of these companies were in business from about the 1920s or 30s through about the 50s, and then a lot of them go away. A few new ones start as well, and then there's also overseas production, which is where it gets kind of crazy. Yeah, my aunt loved Betty Boop and looked a little bit like her, so she ended up with all the Betty Boop stuff. Um, let's see. Here's another acro agate, and this is the aventurine, and you really see the sparkle there. And you also see a little crease line from this being a transitional era. Um, this one is called Bacon and Egg in the swirl. This one is the Ghost Swirl. This one is uranium and it's called Pistachio, and this sold for $130. This one is Kokomo, another maker. I don't have a lot of Kokomo examples, but this is a Kokomo patch. You notice it looks different than acro agate. This one sold for 130. Kokomo was in business a very short time. A few of the companies only lasted a few years. I think they were in business just like from the mid 20s to the Depression and then went out. So not a lot of their stuff exists. This is one of theirs called Opalescent Rainbow. Heaton is another company that was, you see a fair amount of Heaton. This one's called the Firecracker with the yellow and orange stripe. This one is called Strawberry Shortcake. You kind of get the idea. What's a reliable source and how would you send photos for identification? I'm going to talk about a collectors group that you can contact. I know Karen with a C said that we have there's a Facebook group as well, and then I'm going to give you some other references for identification that you can look at yourself and maybe able to figure some things out. I should not have turned that off. I have to figure out where I am now. Bear with me. Okay, we saw those. All right, let's see here. Okay, I think that's where we were. Yes, uranium pistachio. Okay, opalescent patch. That's the Kokomo. The Kokomo. Okay, I'm back. We saw the Heaton. So here we go. Um, Davis was a company that existed for a little while. They made the dark green one at the bottom. The ones at the top are Jabo, and Jabo is an interesting thing. Jabo kind of picked up out of the ashes of Champion and some other companies, and a fellow named David McCulloch was involved, and he did a lot of stuff in the. They made things the same way using similar designs. The colors usually aren't quite as bright, but uh, he helped extend the life of the marble industry in this country, but it also creates some confusion. And I'll show you some stuff of his, but that's a whole area in and of itself that this is where it starts to get complicated for identification. But again, we're going to give you some help and some sources to go to. This one is Bacor, as they call it. This is a Mexican company. Now, they've been around since the 1930s and they're still producing. This is a pretty early one, and you can see it had a hard life, but it's a multicolor. This sold for $360, so there is interest in their earlier pieces as well. This one is a shooter. Notice that sort of orange peel effect on the outside. That's something I don't see in the finishing of a lot of American marbles. So I don't know whether that's a typical thing with them, but it's something I noticed on this piece. And this is their Michelangelo line, and these sell for about $50 each. Another big company is Marble King. Corinne showed me this. She said the reason they're in Payton City, which we've heard of because they also had a glass company and a dinnerware company in that town. Marble King put this out for their 75th anniversary. And she said the reason she bought this is because then she could tell what their later stuff looked like so that she could distinguish it from their earlier stuff. Um, it's a little blurry, but you can see there's a star pattern with 5 lobes. That makes this cat's eye a Marble King. And of course, cat's eyes are named that because they are transparent and then have the color in the middle. This, on the other hand, is Vitro, another big marble maker in the later period. And Vitro does, their cat's eyes are not as defined as the Marble King, so you can tell the difference. Um, the shooters, the smaller ones in there are Vitro. The bigger ones are boulders from Bacor in Mexico. And you can see some difference in the brightness of the color, but again, this is where you start needing resources to identify stuff. This is Vitro with a clear panel. This is a Vitro agate. This is a parrot, and this one sold for $210. So then we get into contemporary, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on contemporary because, like Corinne says, it's this is all it gets very complicated depending how far into it you get, and it also is something where the contemporary stuff is really kind of a different animal. It's a lot like contemporary art glass in general, but contemporary marbles start about 1970 with a fellow named Roe Purser. He also made paperweights, but he and his partner in California started doing marbles. And my general rule of thumb is if it's bigger than about 3.5 inches, I start calling that an orb rather than a marble. But they did a lot of smaller pieces, and this is one of theirs with the starry man at the window. It's called Window Sky, Man Window Sky, for obvious reasons. And Roe Purser sells pretty well. This is probably a $150 marble. Um, this is some of the companies are companies we recognize from other art glass. This is Gibson, and I like the colors. This is Gentile glass. This is Millefiori, where they take the same kind of rods that you saw when we saw the twists and such things, but they actually put them all together, melt them all together, and then polish it out into a round. And so you actually see the ends of the rods of glass. instead of the side of the rod twisted like we saw in some of the candy cane looking things earlier. Um, this is a contemporary sulfide with the horseshoe, not as yellow, a little different clarity, but again, you want to be careful with these and definitely look into what's being made recently. This is Nadine McDonald. This is a porcelain, so this is like a china, but she's a contemporary producer, and her stuff sells for maybe half or two-thirds of what an antique one would sell, because she's pretty popular. This is Primo Taza lattice. Notice with the contemporary ones, most of them are not trying to do things that look like antique marbles. They're trying to do things that look like paperweights and art glass. So it's more along that kind of thing. And they're really beautiful. It's a collecting area all its own. Now, this one's Mark Matthews, and this does look more like a traditional marble with the aventurine and everything. But notice how studied and controlled the lines are. This isn't something being made by a factory for kids, and so it's more precise. So you're not likely to be fooled. Plus, most of them sign their work. Interestingly enough, these are popular. Jocelyn at Crazy Lamp Lady is selling these well on knickknacks. They are selling at the marble auctions alongside the older ones, but they are not exceeding the listed price. This market seems to be fairly well known. So if they say something's going to sell for $100, it usually sells for $100. Whereas the antique ones are the ones that are really surprising people on the upside. This is Rodney Andrew, which I think is a really cool design. Jimmy Driscoll, he's a Native American. Now, this is maybe a little bit more like antique marbles, but look at the size. And also look at the little stand. You can buy little lucite marble stands, but I'm going to show you a couple of other ways, one of which Miss Wildlife mentioned, and another one I'll show you that you can display marbles without buying fancy marble stands. This is Larry Castile. This one sold for $100. I just think it's really fun op art. Definitely does not look like a toy marble. Lake Superior glass, the planetary version looks like Jupiter. These are by Steve Davis. Now, a lot of the ones we just showed you are selling for big money. The Steve Davis, they're nice. They're a little less controlled. These sell for about 25 or 30 a piece. So there are examples for every budget. And these came from Miss Wildlife's collection, and I thought they'd be fun to show. She collects art glass and has a wonderful collection, and she said, I just wanted a few contemporary marbles to go with the paperweights and other things. I really look at the control it takes to make this. I mean, they've got the hemispheres, it looks like a globe. And they do this the same way they do the paperweights, where they form everything in a dome and then insert it in a casing around it. They just don't polish the bottom flat like a paperweight would be. There's the initial on that. I'm not sure who that maker is. This one is really kind of pretty too. And that one has another maker I don't recognize. There's so many contemporary art glass people right now that I hope somebody is keeping track of this stuff, because otherwise we're going to be doing the same thing we did with marbles and saying, okay, how do we tell this one from that one? Now we're going to get into condition a little bit. I said I'd talk about that later. And condition really does matter with marbles, just like anything else, like we were talking about earlier. Condition with marbles, some people use a 10-point scale. I have to say, I don't know that there's an official grading service, because when I look at the auctions, everybody says theirs is a 9.8, and I can tell some are more worn and more damaged than others. But the source that I saw, let me find it so I'm quoting it right, was the, let me see where I have that. Yeah, okay. This is from the West Virginia Marble Collectors Association, and I'm going to go with their condition. Mint is in perfect condition with no marks or damage to the surface. Oops, I lost my picture, sorry. Bear with me a moment. There we go. Near mint has minor damage. Good means it's been played with and has multiple hit marks and maybe some chips and flakes. And collectible means it's really been used a lot. So we'll take a look at just a few things to give you some ideas. This is what they call a football. This is a factory flaw where the machine didn't really get it right, or they didn't. This doesn't have a pontil. This is a machine made, and it's just an odd shape. And some people think that's interesting and collect those. Some people don't because it's a flaw. This is a wonderful vitro with an Easter egg coloration that would probably be worth over $100, but it has a nick. This, on the other hand, is a factory fly. You see the adventurine, and then you see on the bottom, they call these milkies or chalkies. It's where something happens in the glass making process and the coloration just ends up being a little bit odd in that way that you can see. This one is a Peltier. This is a chocolate cow. You can see obvious surface wear. I would say this would constitute a good condition on the scale that we just talked about. It sold for $90 in this condition because it's hard to find. Um, there's another onion skin. Now, this one, it had surface wear too, and so somebody polished it. That's a form of restoration. They had to represent that when they sold it. It sold for $180. If it hadn't been polished and was in the condition it looks like, it might have sold for double that. So condition does matter. Um, okay, so here's another way to display marbles. And Corinne said this is great because it's inexpensive and it looks cool. If you don't want to buy the lucite rings, you can buy, these are craft beads, and they're just clear. And it's the perfect size to hold a standard size marble. And she's got a bag full of them, and I actually think it's a nice way to display them. Then we talked about flower frogs, of course, sell to people who are collecting marbles. Another collector area, of course, is games. We've got Marblehead here from the 1960s. Usually the marbles in games are what they called, believe it or not, commies. And that meant not that they were joining the Bolshevik Revolution, but that they were common. So they're usually solid color or cat's eyes, and they're pretty much standard things you would see. But that is the Marblehead guy. This one, Skill Ball, of course, that's another thing that had marbles in it. Bowling. And of course, a bunch of you mentioned this, Chinese checkers, which had typically colored marbles to match the different colors on the board. This one's by Ohio Art. I think it's the one I grew up with in the 1970s. And so most of those are not valuable marbles, but they are part of it, and marble collectors will sometimes buy the games just because they include that. Okay, here's the Jabo. Now he was involved with Vitro. So after Vitro, David McCullough started working. I hope I'm getting this right. I think he worked with Champion, and they made the classics that were based on the old Vitro marbles. They're typically not as bright in color, and yet at the same time, they're made in the same way by someone who worked. This guy worked for the factory, and so there you go. That's why you really will have to do some work to identify things. Marble runs are the best marble toys. Oh, that sounds like fun. You're right. Um, let's see here. A couple others. We're just going to talk about a few other things. This was made in Mexico. These were never made new for 5 cents. This is a reproduction. These are Sun brand. I remember these as a kid. They sold these at the Navy Exchange because they came from Japan, and I think they cost all of about 10 cents back then. Um, some of them are solid opaques, and they don't tend to have a swirl. The color usually is just sort of a straight ribbon. The reason we have all this information, and here's where, and you can come back and watch the video, but if, for those of you who are looking for information and additional information and sources, this would be a time to record, get your pens out, or refer back to this video. This is the book on acroagate. There were a lot of marble books that were written about 30 years ago. The information is great. Some of them are really good for ID. Prices have changed a ton, of course. This shows the collection. This man and his wife dug all of these marbles out of the old acroagate factory. They have a wall full of them. And this is the kind of work that people went to chronicle this stuff long after these companies were out of business. So there's the book, The Complete Line of Acro Agate. Again, the prices are going to be old school prices. We wish that we could pay for these now, but the information is really good. Yes, Fenton briefly made marbles too. I think towards the end, actually, I think it was one of the things they were doing to try to keep in business. Um, there is another page of the Acro Agate book. So um, you get an idea of all the different things they made, and you might be able to match up. Alley Agate had a book as well, and this is a very complete, thorough book. I'll put this up so you can read it about. He worked for various companies. Okay, yeah, I knew he was really knowledgeable and well respected in the business and knew a lot about the techniques. Um, the white and cobalt look like Janet's. Well, some of them may well be. There's the interior of the alley book. Again, lots of stuff you can compare. There's also a book on machine marbles. There is a book on the Peltier marbles. It is very expensive and hard to get. I've seen it go for as high as $750. Um, so, what do you do if you can't find those books, can't afford them, or just have a few marbles you want to inspect? Well, these are all from the company in Mexico, and this is from a site by a fellow named Stephen Barr, StephenBAhr, and he is on YouTube. And thank you, Corinne, for turning me on to him because he has wonderful videos about here's this company and how you can tell their swirl, here's this company and how you can tell their patterns. And so he is a great YouTube resource for people who are interested in marbles because that is his thing and he knows a whole lot about them and can really help with the identification. And then this is an example. He has a whole thing on swirls. So which one belongs to which company? Well, if you watch his stuff, you can probably figure that out. There are a couple of other sites that I'll tell you about real quickly. I just want to make sure I get them all right. The many of the marbles I showed you tonight came from a recent auction. There is an auction house that specializes in marbles. It is called Block Auction, blockmarbleauction.com, BLOCK. Block Marble Auction is a great place to look at things and see really pretty marbles, contemporary and antique, and everything in between, and get an idea of what the more desirable ones are. They are very knowledgeable and they are where the serious marble collectors are going to buy, and they are getting really good prices for things. Um, we talked about books, we talked about Stephen Barr, also the West Virginia Marble Club has great information, including ways to identify things, and they might be fun to join if you really get into this, because they're right there in West Virginia where a lot of these were made. And so there's people who have great information. There's great glass museums in West Virginia, and there's great information there too. Um, Bibliobooks, thank you. That is helpful, yes. So look for Marvel books there, because that might be a place that maybe not all the collectors know to look for it, but it would be a place you might be able to find something and maybe get a title that's hard to get. Um, where to find marbles? Uh, well, a lot of the distribution was back east because a lot of this was done in the 19th century and the early and mid 20th century, and while they can be all over the place, there's probably more on the east coast than there are here on the west coast where I am right now. um, eBay is a place that you might be able to find bargains by buying in lots. And also, if you become really knowledgeable about this, you might be able to pick things off. eBay is not a place, and this is contrary to a lot of things. I talk a lot about going to eBay, looking up completed sales. I would be very wary of the information that you're getting on eBay. One thing that Corinne pointed out that's absolutely true is that if you do a Google Lens search of a blue marble with a swirl, you're going to get everything that's a blue marble with a swirl. It's not going to say, oh, yeah, that one's by Afroagate and that one's by uh, Peltier and this one's by Champion, because they all look the same to Google Lens. So Google Lens is not going to be useful for this. The other thing is that eBay, a lot of times people see a marble, looks like mine, I think, and they just copy the information and say, okay, mine's this because that's what this one says it is. Well, that doesn't mean that it's right. And so eBay is potentially misleading in this area, and also potentially, if you get knowledgeable enough, a good place to go looking for sleepers that people have misidentified, because that's definitely out there. So um, as far as other places to find them, speaking of sleepers, like I told you, I sold before I knew Corinne was collecting, and maybe before I knew Corinne, I sold 3 or 4 jars full for $100 a piece. And I wasn't paying attention to what they were because I just thought, oh, they're marbles, they're cool. I know some are valuable. I don't see anything that's a Christmas tree, which is the one thing I thought I knew. So I didn't pay much attention to it. Lots of other dealers don't pay much attention either. Estate sale people, they put it out and, well, there could be something good in there. We'll put $60 on it. Well, maybe that's a lot if it's a bunch of cat's eyes. Or maybe there's one marble in there that's worth 3 times the value and everything else you're getting for free. So that's a place to look. And then again, if you get really serious, well, block auction is the place to go if you are a serious marble collector, because wow, do they have the stuff. Um, I think that is, I like this idea. Wow, you could use this for all sorts of things. You're a genius. I like that. Um, you've seen quart and gallon jugs for $20 to $60. Exactly. So, um, or you could go to Corinne's house. Yes. Yes, flower frogs are you're more likely to find, but there's definitely stuff out there. So anyway, I hope that this was helpful and informational, and that at least it gets you started. And I can tell it whetted a few people's appetites for collecting these. I have to say it's gotten me interested in them on a level that I didn't really realize I could be. And so thank you for that. It was very gracious of Corinne to share all this information with me and to help me find more information to share with you. And I hope we haven't created too much competition for her, but I have a feeling that because marbles are everywhere, that everybody will have their own little cache that they can go to, and we can all have fun learning more about this together. So um, I am glad that you will have Janet watch that later. Maybe she can figure out what hers is. Um, I'm already asking relatives for marbles now. That's great. Well, I have really enjoyed doing this. I'm Thank you very much for joining me tonight. If there's any more questions, I'm going to stay in the chat during the outro, but also I will be doing a live sale with Heidi. It'll be simulcast on my channel and on the live channel on Sunday morning. I've got about 10 items, and it's not all glass. I've got ceramics, and in fact, it's about 50-50 this time. I decided to mix it up, and she and Eileen are too. So I think it'll be interesting to see if you go to her Facebook, which is Heidi Ann 200, I think. Anyway, it's if you go to her Facebook for Rosie's Auction House, the catalog's already up, and you can even pre-bid if that's too early, or you go to church in the morning. Then you can bid ahead, and then we'll have our live sale and updates about everything next Monday after I get the good news, and we will sell a bunch of the stuff behind me here too. So I look forward to seeing you for all of that, and I'm so glad. It was amazing to me because I learned a ton doing this. So please continue to suggest topics. I know Lisa has talked about some things that she'd like to do. I know Willie Joe, who were not able to be here tonight, have referred me to someone who is doing knows a lot more about turquoise jewelry, and I'd like to have her on. Zeno and I think tomorrow night, I think for the Patreon folks, we're going to try doing a movie watch together. And the reason for that, and it's, I'll spill the beans, it's Sunset Boulevard. We'll talk about some of the props and some of the cool stuff that's in it, but also we're doing it to see if we tried it once before and it was kind of herky jerky, but we have a new program. We want to get to where we can do things. Right now, he's in Kentucky, I'm in Washington. And the goal is to make it so that we can have two people in different areas together on screen, like a lot of other people do, so that we can have some special guests for these chats and other things we do on the channel. So, will my tree be for sale? I have to be honest. No, I'm sorry. I love the tree, and it's my Charlie Brown Christmas tree, and it's the only one I kept. I got rid of the big one, so that one is staying with me. Um, but almost everything else will be. 7 a.m. Pacific. No, it'll be 8 a.m. Pacific, which I realize is a horrible time for me to have to get up. But they call it morning because it's a time of great sadness. So there you go. Anyway, um, and thank you so much. I am very glad that you're part of it too. And all of you, just very, very, very grateful to get to do this with you. It has really boosted my spirits this year during my recovery to have these to look forward to. And I can't wait for another year of fun stuff. And again, if you have topic suggestions, the antique nomad at gmail.com is the place. And um, I think, yeah, I try to. I want it to remind. I want it to be informational like that, but I also want to make sure that it's fun. So that's why I try to make sure and have lots of pictures because I remember I had a history professor who was terrible, and then a friend of mine had the same class with a history professor who was amazing because he could take you into it and show examples and show pictures and make it come to life. So I'm trying real hard to do that because I don't want it to be just a lecture, but it is fun to pick a topic and get to talk about some things. And I learn too, and that keeps me going. So, uh, hello, Raina. You're a good girl, Raina. Raina's a dog, by the way, just so you know. Um, Well, anyway, thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the outro here, and we will see you again soon.